Peace and Justice Center is funded by individual donations, so anybody who's able to contribute for being here, we welcome that, but you also don't have to. But your support in whatever capacity is appreciated. We are here tonight. I am here with Linda Kincaid, who's an advocate for guardianship and conservatorship.
Let's say rights of persons under conservatorship.
Okay.
I am not an advocate for conservatorship.
Thank you, yes. So you are the founder of CEDAR?
Richard Calhoun and I are the founders of CEDAR, which is a coalition for elder and disability rights.
So, and she's been doing work since
2010. And it came about because my mom was a victim of an abusive conservatorship. And I've been on the warpath ever since.
How it usually happens with all of us. So we're going to be showing some film clips, and then both Linda and I have a little bit that we're going to talk about, and then we're going to kind of open it up to everybody else for conversations. Santa Clara County is talking about it at the meeting on Tuesday, the 17th. We do not know if they're planning to vote on it at that point or not. So I am trying to recommend people that are able to attend the meeting to please attend the meeting. There will be some people, some advocates from the unhoused community that have kind of a platform that they're wanting people to stick towards, include your own piece, and I'll hopefully be able to send that out to more people once I get back in connection with those people. But Linda, do you want to start out? Or do you want to start out just with the video?
While you're doing that, I'll just say really quickly, conservatorship is imposed on a person by the court. If there are allegations that you're not able to take care of yourself, the court can place you under conservatorship of some other person. And the story we're going to look at here, these are all people who are in Santa Clara County and under conservatorship of a public guardian.
Oh, the video or the other one?
Okay, we'll do that one first. So this one is a documentary film in Nevada they call it guardianship. We call it conservatorship, they call it guardianship. It's the same thing. It's where a court takes away your civil rights, gives someone else the power to make nearly every decision about your life. You don't have access to your funds. You can't enter into contract, which means you can't hire an attorney. And of course you can't decide where you live, you can't decide on your own medical care. A lot of cases you can't even see people that you want to see. And this is a 4-minute demo reel from that film, The Guardians.
And just to be transparent, content warning on all of this, there is some difficult material to watch. I think this cut is not too in-depth, but there is some trauma and abuse that does go on within the conservatorship guardianship process. Just to be aware and let people, and there's no real, feel free to take care of yourself in whatever way you need to, and navigate the space however you need to.
Can we turn off the lights during that?
It's a small little town, and they all know what's going on.
This is corruption at so many levels.
There's more to this than meets the eye. It needs a master, and I mean a master investigation.
They don't play fair at all. And that's what I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna do it, but I'm gonna fight.
I want people to know it can happen to you. Something was wrong, and my gut told me somebody took my parents. I don't know who it is, but somebody took my parents.
I mean, how do you react when you've been told that in Las Vegas, the elderly are being systematically and fraudulently declared as incompetent and forced into guardianship? All of a sudden, and without warning, their lives, their finances, and their health care are being controlled by a private guardian appointed by the family court that's supposed to protect them.
Just like that. My whole life was shot.
It's been on record that it's $47 trillion are about to change hands from the elderly to their children.
When somebody is given guardianship of you by the court, in essence, they become that person.
And then have access to all of their bank accounts, all of their retirement funds.
Stocks, bonds, will, everything.
Instead of wealth passing down through the generations of families, we're seeing wealth passed down through the guardian.
Someone could knock on my door, take me away, and walk off with everything that I own.
They took my house, they took my car, they took $41,000 out of my bank account.
They stole everything. Everything was empty.
My mom is not dead. They were auctioning off her clothes.
That is so scary.
It's an absolute conspiracy. This is a perfect example of what a conspiracy is, because one or two people could not do this on their own. This is racketeering.
This is a multi-million-dollar business in which everyone's getting a piece of it.
Lawyers, private guardians, home health agencies.
I fought with her. I said, I'm not going. I started crying. I said, I'm not going anywhere. Who are you?
I literally was kidnapped from my own home, drugged before I got to a hospital, asked them where I was, and they said, you're on the 6th floor in the psych ward.
They hold me like criminal.
This is truth that's stranger than fiction. But how is this happening? We have authorities, we have government that is supposed to protect us, but yet it's the government that's participating in the harm that's being done.
As soon as my mother became a ward of the state, all her health issues started up. It's the industry of slow death. I can't explain how they do it because it's illegal, but they do it.
Don't you know this is the United States of America, that people have their civil and constitutional rights?
And you guys fucking killed my mother.
And I can think to myself, well, if that was my story, which it isn't, how would I react? Would I be able to control my temper? I think I'd be in prison right now that it had happened to my parents.
You touch my mother and you move her, I'm gonna take the bat and I'm gonna beat the hell out of you.
You gotta keep the light shining on the people that are being taken.
People go in, corpses come out. I was hoping so much that her would come home.
Everything they've been doing for the last 30 years is about to be exposed.
It must be stopped. It must be revealed. And it must be revealed today.
The perpetrators are starting to be cornered and they're starting to act strange.
Scary and scary. What's going on? We gotta fix it.
We're gonna get this mess cleaned up.
Reveal this.
Oops, I didn't want to do that. I guess I'm going to have to. Oh well. The TV didn't cooperate today. It never does. You said 420?
Yeah, I think 420 is where Giselle's story starts. The first one's just about a lady's house. Well, basically a fraudulent reverse mortgage, which, you know, is interesting, but that's not really what we're talking about today.
Oops.
Attorney, he's
There you go. That looks right.
of her being forced out of her home again through no fault of her own. Now, tomorrow at 6, the county is accused of isolating the clients they are supposed to serve. We'll hear from a woman who says she feels like she's in prison. That's tomorrow at 6 o'clock.
All right, Dan, thanks. Santa Clara County's Public Guardian's Office is facing criticism tonight.
Now, some families tell us that the county is isolating their elderly loved ones, unnecessarily taking control of their entire lives, right down to who can visit.
Dan Noyce is back now with part 2 of our I-Team investigation.
Oh, Dan and Caroline, I don't often get the police called on me for a story. It happens, but I didn't expect it in this case. All I did was ask to see a couple of ladies whose families say are being isolated by Santa Clara County.
I'm with my family and they took that away from me. You know, what else can they take?
That's the voice of 82-year-old Gisela Reardon.
I can't do anything for any year.
I know.
Because this is not a prison.
It's like a prison.
She suffers from dementia, and her son Marcus made the recording during one of only 3 visits he's been allowed with his mother in more than 2 years.
They hijacked my mother.
The Santa Clara County Public Guardian's Office conserved Gisela, took over her personal and medical decisions in 2010 after she visited hospitals 19 times in a single year. A court investigator determined her family, including her son, could not care for her.
Maybe there were family members involved with the person, but they weren't caring for that person by the appearance.
Lee Poland is the director of Santa Clara County Social Services. He would not speak specifically about Gisela's case, but said the public guardian does not conserve a person without cause.
It would have to be a constellation of situations. Was there money that was available to provide the elderly person care that she needed, and it wasn't being provided?
Marcus was living with his mother at the time the county took over. He says he loves her and was doing the best he can.
My mom wants to come home. We have a home. She has food, clothing, shelter. I can take care of her. I was taking good care of her.
But the public guardian kicked out Marcus and sold the house to pay for his mother's care. He ended up living in his car for a time, and Gisela was ultimately moved to an assisted living facility.
This is devastating. My mother and I are very, very close. We have always been very close.
Marcus is clearly frustrated with the situation, and a court investigator wrote he becomes hostile toward facility staff, yells, becomes disruptive, and overwhelms staff with his demands. So the public guardian got a court order restricting his visits with his mom. They must be supervised. Marcus says he recorded their last meeting to protect himself from what he calls the public guardian's lies.
They have done it to me, taken everything. Why? I'm not a criminal.
Okay.
I haven't done anything.
You managed to make your mother very upset.
I didn't make my mother upset. She's upset, sir.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to turn off your tape.
Giselle clutched my arm and sobbed onto my shoulder for an hour talking about how lonely she is.
Linda Kincaid is an advocate with the National Association to Stop Guardian Abuse. She says not only is the public guardian restricting Marcus Reardon's visits with his mom, but all of Gisela's potential visitors. Kincaid was able to see her twice before getting kicked out of the facility. She says 18 members of her group have tried to call and set up visits with Gisela. All have been denied.
If the laws were followed and her rights were observed and honored, this would not be happening.
Kincaid points to the Notice of Conservatees' Rights, a document in every conserved person's court file. Unless a court limits or takes away a right, like visits from family or friends, then the conservatee retains the right to have these visitors. And California Code Title 22 states a resident has a right to have his or her visitors, including ombudspersons and advocacy representatives, permitted to visit privately during reasonable hours and without prior notice.
If you took your grandmother and locked her up in the spare bedroom, you could go to jail for that. But if the public guardian does it to your grandmother, it's called conservatorship.
I wanted to see if the public guardian is following the rules. I walked into Villa Fontana, asked to see Gisela and another conserved woman. The staff called the county.
The resident is conserved by the county, and we have to follow the rules. They have a court order that puts them in charge of the resident.
The public guardian's office told me by phone that I couldn't see Gisela or the other woman until they performed a background check on me, and they instructed Villa Fontana to call the police.
Why call the police on me? What danger did I pose to anyone at the nursing home?
I think you and the public should feel good about that, because that means that the public guardian, acting as the conservator of individuals in any kind of residential facility, is thinking first of protecting that person's interest in
Oh, come on. What about me was a danger to anyone?
I introduced myself to the officer who responded. He didn't really understand why he was there. He gave me an incident card and left.
We absolutely want people to see other individuals, to have socialization, to be around family and friends, but it needs to be done in a way that isn't going to be alarming to them and that we know about.
Marcus Reardon says I got just a taste of the trouble he's received from the county. According to the court investigator, Gisela, despite her dementia, is capable of choosing a president. They made sure she's registered to vote. Marcus says she should be able to pick her own visitors and choose where she lives.
What's wrong? If I'm still alive, would you let me come home for Christmas, like just Christmas Day?
Now, Marcus says his mother finally got a phone in her room so they could speak more often. He's made a couple of mistakes in fighting to regain control of his mother's care, failing to show up for 2 court dates. It's been a stressful time, and Marcus felt the deck was stacked against him. Now, by the way, the public guardian said it would take 2 days for that background check. It's been more than 2 weeks, and I'm still waiting. Nothing yet. Yeah.
You want to ask, were they protecting Giselle or themselves?
That's it.
It's bizarre.
You know, their rules are absolute. They are in total control, and they should be able to see people like me. You ought to be able to walk in without prior notice and see something.
When was that clip from?
That happened end of 2012.
Wow.
I'll let you go in and do your part. I'll let you talk and explain. And then I'll show the last clip after that.
Can you bring the lights back on?
They're right.
Oh, yeah.
Switch rights over
Under
there.
the bright side. Yes. There we go. Sorry.
Okay. In a small group, let's just turn it into a chat.
Yeah.
As you saw, I was involved in Giselle's case. I got thrown out. I knew that it would be very difficult to get in to see her, and so I waited until a holiday weekend and waited until after hours when the B team was on duty, and I just moseyed in with, hi, I'm here to see Giselle. And the staff, the not so bright staff, just assumed I was with the public guardian's office because those were the only people who got in to see Giselle, was people from the public guardian. So they just assumed I was with the public guardian. And so I went in and visited Giselle several times over a holiday weekend, and I recorded all of the visits. And then when Tuesday came around and the regular staff came back on duty, they're like, hold it, she's not the public guardian. And next thing I know, I'm sitting in Giselle's room, I'm sitting there, and she's like hanging, because she would just like glom onto me. And one of the staffers shows up with these 4 guys. You have to leave now. Like, well, why? What's the problem here? So they threw me out, and when you're being thrown out, you of course keep the recording going and try to engage and keep a conversation going without causing trouble. So they alleged that I had gotten completely out of control, causing disruptions, potentially even getting violent. That's why they had to kick me out, because my behavior was so outrageous. And when I was talking to Jim O'Donnell, the reporter who did this story, Jim O'Donnell's Dan Noyes is a pretty face. Jim O'Donnell's the guy behind the camera. Guess who I identify with. And Jim's like, well, they said you created a disturbance. And Jim, here are my recordings. I recorded every moment I was with Giselle. Here are my recordings, and some of what you heard came from the recordings that I made. Those, I think it was 3 days I got to see her.
Oh, wow.
So the reason I wanted to start with the film The Guardians in Las Vegas was kind of show the big picture. This is happening everywhere, it's all over the country. It's about money. Isn't everything about money? But people watch the film The Guardians and say, oh, but that couldn't happen in California, or that couldn't happen here. It couldn't happen where we live. Well, this is where we live. You saw Villa Fontana, that's at Prospect and Lawrence, right across from where Orchard Supply used to be at Westgate. This is very much right here. This public guardian is the one who would be in charge if we do expand conservatorship in Santa Clara County, with what they're talking about, expanding conservatorship to where now it wouldn't be for old people who have money. Now it would be for people who are sleeping in the wrong doorway. Like, oh, we're so concerned about this person that we never shown any concern about before.
Right.
But now we have this program, and we need to put people into a program, because otherwise you're not going to get funding to have your staff and continue your program. I mean, you need a head count in your program. So you go identify people who are sleeping in the wrong doorways, and what I've seen in probate court is all it takes is allegations. It is extremely rare to have actual facts, documents, one testimony. Evidence, we've heard of evidence, that is extremely rare. There is some modicum of due process in criminal court where I can't just say,
I think you stole something from me and therefore you get hauled away and thrown in jail. If I say, I think you stole something, there has to be an investigation, we have to bring evidence, you have to be charged, you have a chance to have an attorney, you have a chance to respond. It doesn't happen that way in probate. I can just say, well, I don't think you're able to take care of yourself, and I'm going to take over your finances, and I'm going, the benevolent person that I am, I'm going to take care of you and your bank account and anything that you might own. And all I need is a few allegations, and the typical conservatorship hearing is 10 minutes, maybe 15. The shortest one in my files is 3 minutes, which is long enough to walk in, Your Honor, here we need a signature on this form. Thank you, Your Honor. That's it. That woman, actually she is still alive. That was in, I think that was 2012. She's still alive and she's still isolated. Giselle's story went very differently because of having ABC 7 come down and expose that your county is a mess. After that, Giselle was able to have visitors. I visited her many more times over the next 2 years. She finally passed away at 84. But because of ABC coming in, it did turn things around. She was able to start having visitors. We sponsored a bill, SB 397. Could be. I think it's 397. We're going back to 2013 now. We sponsored a bill that was based on Giselle's story and my mom's story, which was very similar, that guarantees the right to have visitors. And that became part of the probate code and is now in the probate code, stating that a conservatee retains that personal right to have visitors, phone calls, personal mail, unless the court takes that right away. And of course, we all know that new laws just change everything and it all becomes perfect the next day, right? It's completely ignored. You know, that was my introduction to working through legislation and getting laws passed, like, wow, we did it, we got this bill passed. And it didn't change a thing. I think I gave you a copy of an article, a series of articles I wrote. I've got some more copies here. Just go up to Alameda County, Oakland. Eleanor Frericks has been under conservatorship, locked up, isolated since 2012. She was allowed one visit, which fortunately I was able to audio record, and I'm now working on a film that basically lets Eleanor tell her story. But since 2012, one visit, 1 hour, one visit, that's it. I don't think that is what anyone had in mind when these laws were put in place that were meant to help people who need help. I think it was well intentioned. It's been completely twisted. Basically, nobody follows the laws. You know, we have a very good probate code. You know, if you read the California probate code, like, wow, there's a lot of protections. There are a lot of rights. There's a lot of review and due process built in. And it all looks really nice on paper, but it doesn't happen that way. And this gives you an introduction, and this is why I think here in Santa Clara County, we need to be very concerned that our Board of Supervisors is wanting to expand conservatorship to include people who might be sleeping in the wrong doorway. It's a way to get them out of there so they're not cluttering up the landscape. And I would suspect that there will be money attached to those heads and where they go. And I haven't looked into those details. It's just, I've never yet seen the government do anything that didn't make a profit for somebody.
So I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that the way things are right now, as you were trying to explain, where, you know, I'm so benevolent, I'm gonna come over and help Michelle. Michelle, you know, want to really help you, and what I'm getting a signature from Michelle saying, yeah,
No, you don't need her signature. You don't need her agreement at all. People get placed under conservatorship not even knowing that a petition's been filed against them.
So is the petition again? No, pardon me. Trying to get over this thing. Is the petition against them that says, okay, now you're conserved because
you weren't taking care of yourself,
yeah,
or your family wasn't taking care of you.
And all it takes is allegations. I don't need facts. I don't need proof. I just make the allegations, and a group in San Francisco did a study, over 96% of petitions are approved.
I watched a video in preparation for this. It was kind of an indie film of an African-American elderly man and a white, or no, it was the other way around. It was a white man and an African-American woman that were both in their 90s. And they,
oh, yeah, Edith and Eddie.
Yeah, Edith and Eddie. And it was heart-rendering, you know, just tear your heart apart, because you're watching this older couple that you can see them taking care of each other.
And they love each other, they want to be together.
And they lived in the same house, they did their exercises, they did everything that was needed. And the family members of the wife, because then they got married, the church accepted them, it was an amazing story. They got married, and then one of the daughters decided, I want my mother's house. And then there was the concept of the othering also, that, you know, a biracial couple, they didn't like that, so then they took the woman away to Florida, and the night that I think it was the night that they took them, or the night she was due to be returned, and she never got returned. It was promised 2 weeks, we'll have her back, you know, whatever. The guy went septic and passed away. So, you know, but this was all done, you know, and there was an active daughter taking care of the couple even, and advocating for the couple, but the conservator had never met them. Conservator interviewed them over the phone and actually had very little to do with talking to the two older people, because all that was being discussed was, you have to go away. And, you know, you can't take care of yourself. And it didn't matter that they were taking care of themselves, but it was just that whole, they were different, they were viewed as something that needed to be controlled, and that's what happened, and one of them died as a result, so. And the mother never got sent back, so.
Yeah, and you gave me a great lead-in.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Thank you. A series of articles I wrote. Another biracial couple, the one I mentioned, Eleanor, who is locked up and imprisoned in Oakland. Eleanor is a rich white woman, not nearly as rich as she was, but she's still worth several $100,000. She married Ken at the end of 2011. She married her neighbor, close friend of the prior 10 years, who's an African-American man. So we have rich white woman marries African-American man. 6 weeks later, she is under conservatorship. It was that fast. And a few court hearings later, Eleanor's taken out of her home, put into a locked dementia facility, and that's it. She's locked up. Nobody gets to see her. And that is still continuing. She is still alive as far as I know. The last time I checked the court records a couple months ago, she was still alive. And she is still not allowed to see anyone from the outside.
Regardless of what legislation says. Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I'm going to shift this a little bit more into the field of disability and disability conservatorship or guardianship. The video that I found that I wanted to show you is actually from the East Coast, but I think very many similar things happen out here as well. And it's not, you know, it's not necessarily one thing or the other. It's a nationwide problem, and just a nationwide disregard of, I'd say, difference. Whether that's right or not, I don't care. It's my opinion. It's my opinion. I'm getting better at just stating that, which is a good thing. This is a video called, it's a Let 'Em Out. It's a video campaign to free people with disabilities who are committed to long-term care facilities, i.e. nursing homes, against their will in the name of profit. Eventually, the person working on this is hoping to do a feature-length film on the issue and compile the different episodes that she's done in that way. This is the slowest process ever.
I wanted this video to go out to my mom, who's been suffering a lot and has worked so hard to keep, food on the table for years.
I care about her so much. So, just gonna sing a couple songs that I know she really likes. As the deer panted towards the water, so my soul longeth after thee.
I love my son. I couldn't hold him. I couldn't kiss him. I couldn't say goodbye to him.
States that the person being talked about died in 2015 at the age of 31. And that there were contested charges, thoughts on what the cause was of his death. And then the mother blamed it on the
I got a phone call that we believe he has pneumonia. We're sending him out to the hospital. He got to the hospital. Yes, he had pneumonia, and he was having a hard time breathing. And over the course of 2 days, the breathing had become so difficult that they needed to put him on a machine.
Ricky died at the medical center without any family or friends present. Then Richard, who lived in Florida, ordered a DNR on Ricky and had his body cremated, which Nancy says was against Ricky's religious beliefs. The parents disagreed, and the Let Him Out used court records to kind of compile the storyline. This is a promotional video where nursing and skilled staff is dedicated to providing the most sophisticated medical and neuro whatever care.
Single occupancy, carpeted rooms. I was pitched a world-class gym, jacuzzis, massage therapist, neuropsychiatrist on call.
I didn't think so.
So we get there, unload the car, and I'm introduced to the social worker. And then when she took me through the second set of double doors and I heard it shut behind me and I looked over my left shoulder and saw the keypad, I went, oh boy, this is going to get interesting real fast.
EJ is the person that was talking. He suffered a stroke in 2015 after his wife died suddenly. The 55-year-old Navy vet was hospitalized in New York for post-traumatic stress and clinical depression. The hospital social worker recommended this care facility
I'm
to
not
him.
even in there 3 days, and I'm already realizing that this place is what it is. It's a prison without bars. Then one day they sent in the woman from what is simply known as the therapy office. She goes, do you feel suicidal today? I go, oh hell yes. Bang. I got stuck on a 24/7 suicide watch for, my guess was about a month. And that is having someone within arm's reach of you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I couldn't leave the room. They were bringing all my meals to me. The neuropsychiatrist that they had there Says, I need you to start taking this anti-anxiety drug because you need to think about your emotions sneaking up on you around the clock, trying to convince me that I needed 2 rounds of this medication. Well, I just flat out refused because just the 1 dose a day was causing my mind to go foggy in a way I felt very uncomfortable with. So what I would do is I would take that that particular pill, then I would go and spit it out in the toilet.
What was the medication that he was suggesting?
Risperidol. It was an antipsychotic.
Over 75% of the patients at Care 1 have received antipsychotics more than 4 times the state average and close to 4.5 times the
I don't think
national
anybody in that institution is listening to the patients and asking, is this something you want? The use of antipsychotics to control populations, when nursing homes, juvenile detention facilities, goes back a long ways. They're using them as chemical restraints. They're using it to benefit those who are running the place, to make it easier to manage. That's the thought. Maybe they'll sleep a long time, they won't move so much. The hope, I suppose, is they'll be less aggressive. So anyway, when I hear about that, I hear a society that is turning its back on these people and is not trying its best to create a humane life for people.
Ricky's father in Care 1 went to the court many times to have Ricky declared
They were concerned that there was mental damage secondary to the HIV. And it was clear to me that, well, he certainly wasn't the young man that I knew.
Roger's guardian, I think, is similar to Laura's law, or similar to our guardianship. They must be appointed to
I noticed that you
approve
had
the
already
treatment.
cared about yourself. Yeah. That's why I got your clean plate club. I'm good at taking care of myself. Yeah, I'm very good at taking care of myself. You couldn't do that if someone was, say, incapacitated.
Perlixin was proposed with many side effects listed.
You also have people complaining of something called akathisia. Akathisia, and especially with injections of powerful drugs like Perlixin or Risperidol. And they complain about this inner agitation. They can't sit still. So even at the time that the drug is being used to make them less aggressive, internally they feel like, and go watch what people describe akathisia like, I just want to kill somebody, or I want to kill myself. And it's described as a type of torture. Go to any facility where you're medicating people heavily with these drugs. There's a lot of patient-on-patient violence.
One roommate, John, is a very tidy, intellectual man from New York. One morning he heard the guy next door going into the bathroom, and he heard him urinating all over the place. John opens the door and starts cussing at him, and then hauls off and slugs the guy. They sent in 3 behavior techs and pinned him to his bed. He's cussing, and they're threatening to tie him to the bed. Is that what you want? And all he wanted to do was to be left alone.
They diagnosed him with 5+ psychiatric disorders to justify the antipsychotics. But there were no actual psychological tests administered. It was all based on his behavior. After extensive testimony from Ricky, the judge found him capable of making his own decisions. So the question is, what happened to Ricky? According to Richard, Ricky would not take the drugs for his HIV. Nancy, his mother, insists their son was HIV negative, but Richard said Nancy, a born-again believer, as an AIDS denialist who told Ricky not to take the medication. A second cause of death
was sepsis, which they presume was from a bed sore.
From a bed sore.
Are not people being compulsorily admitted to mental hospitals, or are people with disabilities. They have no forum for their voice. Society's not used to listening to those people, and frankly, it's going to say these people are not reliable witnesses to their own experience.
Between 2000 and 2016, they filed for guardianship of 112 of its patients. The facility holds up to 164. Most were successful, and the court, they were awarded the right to administer antipsychotics. And they did not respond for a request to an interview. Of course not.
And the only way people know about it is by going through court records.
Pretty much. So that kind of takes me intros into my section of why to me Laura's Law is so inappropriate for many, many reasons. And I won't be able to talk about all the reasons because I'm not a representative of every one of those populations that encounter those realities. But I can talk about my own personal reality. Around 2015, I wrote a poem called The Living Dead, and I wanted to read just a couple of stanzas from it. The space of the living dead is a fear-filled place, locked forever, watching the space where the living walk and feel and play, where sadness has meaning and passion a place. The living dead are dead alone, no connection, no friends, no understanding, a lack of grace. The living dead space is empty, is void of all meaning and feeling, of all passion and place, of all everything that gives love and affection to the soul that is lost. My soul had been lost for a long time. When I moved out here, I lived here from 2006 to 2016 without my mother here, and then I moved my mother out here in 2017. Her biggest surprise was to hear me laugh out loud. In the apartment, just out of nowhere, she'd suddenly hear a noise, and she's like, oh my goodness, it took me a while to get used to that. Because up until pretty much up until I moved out here, even after the first couple of years I was out here, I was still struggling. But, I've been immersed in the mental health system. I once wrote a 10-page document about my treatment trauma from the mental health system. That document was written when I was in a hospital that was actually very, very helpful to me. They gave me care that went above and beyond what most people would get in their individual states. I was living in Indiana at the time. I had to travel to New Orleans to get this treatment. Mm-hmm. It was only through my self-advocacy that I actually was able to find the hospital, locate it, go to it, receive the care I received and the support that I received, and get put on a whole different track from where I had been. My mental health problem started in my early 20s. I went on Social Security disability around the age of 24, 25. The system that was supposed to help me improve and feel better is a system that actually caused more abuse and trauma to me than the abuse and trauma that was in my childhood. There were years that I bounced in and out of inpatient care. Now, that's important in the context of Laura's Law to know that based on the qualifiers for Laura's Law, I could have been put into that system at any time. The fact that I have a history of that, even though it's not within the time frame that they say, could potentially mean if I became unhoused that I would be somebody who could not take care of themselves. And I would again be forced into a system that has traumatized and brutalized me over and over and over again. In 1997, less than a year after I lost my partner, I had found another hope of all hopes within the hospitalization system. And this one meant that I traveled from Michigan to New Jersey. It was a treatment program that specialized in LGBTQ loss and life issues, and I thought, hey, I might actually be helped here. When I got there, I tended to destabilize as soon as I was admitted or within the first 24, 48 hours, because it's like all of a sudden my control, I could let go of that control, but yet the facility control didn't always come into place either, the positive control. I say control in this sense in a positive thing. So they escalated me from the Pride unit to basically it was criminally insane unit. It was a full lockdown unit, psychiatric intensive care. They would feed us, they would bring the trays and put them on the floor of the unit, and then we had to stay in our rooms while they were delivering it. We could come out and get the trays. We would not have utensils. We'd have to go and check utensils out with the staff, and usually these were plastic utensils. And I think for some of us, we were only allowed a spoon because we could hurt ourselves on forks or plastic knives. And then the doctor, my savior, came in and he said, I'll help you get out of here if you agree to have electroconvulsive therapy.
Wow.
So to get to a safe place, here I am, history of abuse and trauma. I'm in with criminally insane people that may or may not have had the capacity to control themselves in a way that would have kept me safe. So what did I do? I agreed to go through with a shock treatment. That shock treatment then left me absolutely flatlined and empty for almost a year. But I was in control. I was not in the hospitals. I was compliant. I would take the 6 to 10 medications that they were prescribing me at any one point in time, because that's what I was told a good person did if they wanted to get better. ECT is still important in the treatment. My viewpoint is that it shouldn't be used in the case of trauma. There are some patients that have schizophrenia or bipolar where that's the only option, or it's been proven to do well. But it never should be used in the presence of trauma when a person is a trauma survivor. The treatments ended up stealing memories of my partner and have caused ongoing long-term lasting damage within my brain, to where at times my therapist and I have discussed whether it's a closed head injury, and I received the records after the fact, and that's a whole nother story, but there was evidence that it wasn't being effective except for making me flatline. So in the years that followed this, there was a point in time that I was declared a success because I was able to cut old clothing into rags through Goodwill, working maybe 2 to 4 couple-hour shifts a week, earning less than minimum wage. And if I couldn't meet the quota that I was supposed to meet under regular time tests, then my wage would be cut down even further to match what I was able to produce. And then I'm sure they still use this success story for other people of, oh, hey, we had this person who couldn't do anything and we got her in here and she was doing this and it was great, it was success, it was great, whatever. And if you just be like her, we'll help you too. Unfortunately, the ECT treatment, fortunately for me, unfortunately for the medical system, the ECT treatments wore off. And that led to another period of hospitalization, intensive outpatient treatment, partial and full inpatient, and then following another crisis and a series of attempts on my life, doctors started to refuse to treat me. It was, if we let you in the hospital, you're going to become dependent on it and it'll just make you worse. So you can be here for 24 hours, but we're going to bounce you after that. So they decided the way to treat me then was, hey, you had ECT treatments that were effective before under their measure of effective, which is minimizing the symptoms, not necessarily what my quality of life was. I was living dead for that year. So they said I either agree to the ECT treatments or they would get me committed to the state hospital. I said, okay, have a state hospital rep come and talk to me. And through that process, they realized they couldn't do anything. So I was released. And slow and surely, I did find my way. I found my way through that system into other systems that could help me. So all of this is like, so what does it have to do with Laura's Law? For me, I didn't have a court order that mandated I do something, but I had a system that was telling me if I just behaved well enough, if I just responded appropriately, if I just swallowed the pills, that even though the pills gave me side effects and added symptoms, they would just give me more pills on top of those pills. If I just did those things, by some point I would become better. Or if I just quit thinking about it, maybe I'd be better. But California has a broken mental health system. Dr. Tom Insel, who was recently appointed by Gavin Newsom as his top mental health advisor, has likened the fragmented system to playing a piano with 58 fingers. And I think that references to the 58 counties in California and the fact that each county manages their own mental health system. When I lived in San Francisco and I had a therapist who I connected with and I could understand and all that other stuff, and I moved down here, actually I was unhoused down here, I could no longer be seen at that clinic as soon as my address changed to an out-of-county address. Wow. Regardless of the fact that I had Medicare, regardless of the fact that I had Medicaid, or Medi-Cal as it's known in California, regardless of those realities, I couldn't be seen within that county care system. I could only be seen in this county's care system. When I reached out to this county for care, I was told, oh, well, you present well enough, we can get you in for group therapy maybe in 6 to 8 weeks. And we're sorry you're without a house or a home or a place to sleep. We hope you find someplace. There was no... Of course, they always say, you're welcome to see a psychiatrist and he can prescribe more drugs to you. At one point I did find housing, fortunately. At one point during that time, I was admitted to the psych unit where the doctors asked me they didn't ask me, they were suggesting strongly that I let them make a blind cocktail of all of my medications to help me determine if they actually were doing what I said they were doing or not.
A blind cocktail?
So they would make a slurry of my meds every day. They would keep track of what they were giving me. They did not believe me in saying this medicine helped and that medicine didn't help and I was allergic to these medicines or I had weird reactions to them. So they wanted to test it in a way that I couldn't know what I was doing. This included pain medications that I was on at that point in time as well.
So like a lab rat.
Yeah. And basically my voice, my experience didn't matter. They knew better than me. So they basically in some ways, took all of my autonomy, all of my belief, all of my intelligence and said, you're wrong and you need to listen to us. In San Francisco, and I think all over, there are board and care facilities for people that have long-term mental illness, where these people are stable in those facilities that are being closed because the reimbursement rates are not adequate to cover the expenses of housing these people. So how can we expect this assertive, it's assisted, I have to look at the term of it, because it's the AOT, which is what Laura's Law does, is actually assisted outpatient treatment. So the one level of this is the assisted outpatient treatment, but the assisted is actually mandated. So you are, in a way, you're forced into treatment, And we're talking of forcing people that are currently unhoused, that have tried to get help, that have tried to get housing, that have tried to do other things, and they're at the end of what they're doing, and they just can't, it's like you're asking to re-traumatize them again, by plunking them into the system that is designed to strictly reduce your symptoms with not very much attention to your quality of life. Any measure you see within the psychiatric system, it's to reduce the problematic symptoms as typically defined by the society that we occupy and not by the individual who's experiencing it. I know people with bipolar, with schizophrenia, that the medication causes more complications than helping them. But if they have the support, if they had this other medication that just kept their anxiety down, that doctors don't want to give them because it's addicting or whatever, that they could survive better than what they are. Because no, they have to take the antipsychotic that flatlines them. And they're not allowed the autonomy through coercion. But we add this other layer of control onto this, and what are we doing to these individuals that are already underrepresented, undersupported, unacknowledged, ignored, dehumanized on our streets through Laura's Law, not to mention the other layer of that, which is the enhanced Lanterman-Petras-Short Act, LPS Act, which would then allow them to be detained in psychiatric institutions, much like 45 is saying to do with people that California needs to control their houseless, homeless population. We should all put them into internment camps and let them be there and put them into institutions and lock them up. So any conservatorship, while there are supports and things available to some individuals, especially within psychiatric hospitals, those supports and things are very hard to reach. And there are also organizations that are very strapped for funding. But funding will get a nonprofit the ability to do more. So if they get the AOT, the Assisted Outpatient Treatment contracts, and they have more money to offer more services to more people, as long as they compromise these certain individuals that they're going to say have no rights. So I have a problem with the act. I have a problem with this county implementing it. I've seen it implemented in other counties where just on the basis of somebody having a disability, having cerebral palsy and being homeless, they may or may not have the record to support them being in this program, but they find a way to make them fit. And they disappear. There are some families that this program has helped, but I think if we offer the basic services of mental health care in an appropriate, community-centered way that is not restrictive, focused on more on quality of life than reduction of symptoms, will advance more into this next phase of whatever is coming in America within that system.
Well, anyone else will imagine that for some, the medications that they've been on for any number of years, A, may no longer be effective because they've been on for so long. B, there may be other medications that would provide better help with it, whatever.
Yeah.
And looking at Eastern medications, etc., for a different approach. You're so stuck in Western thinking, it's scary.
That gets into the mental health parity acts that I know Jim Beal has been working for a long time to get parity in the state of California. There was a comprehensive 6-part report that's been released over this last year. And there's a reality that they can only try the old school medications first. They have to do step treatment. So the medications with the most side effects will be given and approved without much chaos. But in order to get the higher tiered medications, your doctor has to have the time and the ability and the inclination to actually advocate and put in the authorization requests or the step, the prior authorizations to get those other, some people, the older medicines work, other people they don't, and the side effects are quite toxic. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I think that there's a lot of different moving parts to this, that it's not exclusively that we, as a community, got a stroke of conscience and compassion, and that we want to implement this under that guise. That needs to be chucked quick, and let's get down to the context in which this occurred. Right. It occurred within the context of Google's gentrification of this city. Yeah. Number one. Number two, there is no there's no precedent for what's going on here in this city, and there's no precedent for the amount of generational neglect that has happened to the most vulnerable citizens in our community, which are you have to figure that the word psyche itself means soul. It does not mean mind. And so I appreciated when you talked about that my soul would, because that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about a soul that has been traumatized and wounded. Mm-hmm. Okay, if that doesn't compel a compassionate response, and the only kind of response to a wounded soul is to lock a human being up, in order to get a human being locked up, you have to point a gun at them and you have to put them in cuffs. Okay, this is the process. Okay, and I think we're not only doing a disservice to the most vulnerable, defenseless human beings in the community, but we're doing something to ourselves as a community when we put that face on it, when we allow ourselves to do that. That happened with slavery. When we allow ourselves as slavery, it didn't just do something to the enslaved, it did something to the slave master. His mind became sickened with the warped sense of superiority, and it warped the mind of the person that was victimized with a warped sense of inferiority. Okay, so we have to see that's what I'm saying. We're talking about things that have a larger, broader scope to it than just the narrow focus that they're giving it. That's number one. Number two, personally speaking, I've spent literally 38 years in institutions, from juvenile halls to jails to prisons. I've literally spent all of my life in the largest mental hospital in the country, which is California Department of Corrections. Yeah. Okay, and there's a lot of untreated mental, and what happens is that when you're in a condition like that and people are experiencing untreated symptoms, people that are in there become sickened. You cannot not become sickened by what you're experiencing. So latent mental health conditions that you may have been able to maintain because of the insanity of the environment, because of the violence, because now all of a sudden those things become normalized and come to the surface. Right. And so what happens is that this person is kept in there for a certain amount of time and then is released into the community. He's automatically marginalized because he's othered. Right. You're a criminal, you're a felon. So now that we've labeled you, we can dehumanize you, which is marginalize you, keep you from employment, we'll keep you from housing. Okay, now when that perpetuates over a 10 to 20 year period of time, anybody that is not mentally ill that has experienced that, there's something wrong with it. There is something very wrong with a human being that has experienced that kind of institutionalized trauma, and there isn't something that is existing in them. That's another component to it. The foster care system. The foster care system, Karen Desaad did an expose about a couple of years ago. She actually changed policy, because what they were doing is that these kids that have been molested as children, that were beaten, and the ultimate of abuses, which is neglect, they had experienced this, became wards of the court, went to into the group home system. Now they're wards. Okay, so they're fed all these medications, Seroquel, Risperidol, Zyprexa, Paxil, all these medications, and they started experiencing, what happened is that their ability for the traumas to surface and then deal with that psychologically and give the person a sense of strength, a sense of their ability to summon the courage to deal with the trauma that they've experienced, that didn't exist, because what they did is they medicated the trauma. And then they turned 18, they have high cholesterol because of the Seroquels, they have diabetes, you know, they have all of these symptoms, and they're walking around thinking that there's something wrong with them, inherently wrong with them. No, they were abused by a system, by the psychiatrist, by the foster care parents. All of these people have profit motive as well as the pharmaceutical companies.
Right.
So I guess in conclusion, that when we're dealing with just this, well, it's Laura's Law because we're tired of seeing people, you should be offended that you see human beings on the streets suffering in such ways. You really should be offended by that. And when that becomes bred out of us as human beings, that's the time to get scared, and that's what I see. So I'm here because I was there.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm speaking on behalf of all my homeboys that I know that are still up in the shop, and they don't have the ability to do what I'm doing here.
Right. And I want to kind of tie this back into the homeless, the unhoused population, because I don't think so far I've really done justice to that demographic and to those individuals that are struggling. They're struggling on the streets. They're swept up. They're moved. They're forced to move from place to place. They're sleeping. They have zero privacy. You wonder why they pee on the streets. They pee because they have nowhere else to pee, or that's been cultured out of them that they no longer care. They use drugs to hide, to treat the symptoms that they are having, because drugs are more readily available to them. Alcohol is more readily available to them than going to see a doctor who points a finger at them and says, you're not working hard enough to stay in a house, to have a place to sleep.
Quicker too.
They are given numbers, treated as entities that have nothing to do with being the human beings that they are. They are othered. Othering is a huge part of this. The violent, to quote Tiny with Core Magazine, there's a violent act of looking away from the person that's sleeping on the ground outside of a house or outside of a building. It's a violent act that we all do. Sometimes I'll do it. I don't do it as much as I used to do it. But there are some people, it's painful and very hard for me to look at. Our society is failing these people. This law will fail these people. This law just starts us down a track of disability justice, that a history of people with disabilities. The ugly laws for people with disabilities, the laws that were on the books until the 1970s, that stated if you were different, if you were ugly, if you had some form of defect, you could be taken away, just strictly for that reality of being other. This is another form of that othering. This is another ugly law. I don't want to see it in this county. I do want to see supports. I want to see housing. I want to see food. I want to see warming centers for these people. I want people to quit dying on the streets because they don't have a dry place to be, because their health consequences are so bad and they don't have any place to turn. Sorry, I'm a little passionate about this topic.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
It's good that humanity's still there then.
Yeah.
And part of the genocide is when they're taking all the unhoused, the words hospital, the words shelter bring this hegemony of that means safety. So re-educating the public, and all of the neoliberal language is going to be in there. You can hear all the capitalism. Even ABC didn't cover enough. They're not covering the system that's part of.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, so what one ask I have for you and anybody else who happens to see this between now and on Tuesday, Santa Clara County will be hearing this issue. They asked last week, they asked for a report from the county, I think mental health services.
Well, wasn't there, I heard recently that, the city council,
Yes.
voted to.
Unanimously.
Yeah.
San Jose City Council voted unanimously to support the county implementing and strongly advising the county implementing Laura's Law and the expanded LPS Act.
Ms. Maya Esparza, however, did add an additional memorandum that humanized the process. She did say no, the language, and I appreciate what the young lady here stated. It was the language. She had a really big problem with the language because the language was very dehumanizing, and it was very critical, and it was blame orientated. And what Maya did is, in her memorandum, she saw it and approached it from a medical standpoint, a medical condition that needs to be treated in terms of the addiction component. She didn't really reference the mental health issue as much as she did because sometimes that's one of the reasons why EPS won't admit a lot of people, because both symptoms seem similar. A schizophrenic and a drug-induced psychosis are sometimes you can't tell them apart. So if a person shows up there and they have meth in their system, they're not going to be admitted because we can't tell the difference if this is legitimate or not. So that's why she wanted, because right now, presently, we only have 10 detox beds at Horizon South. That's it. That's for a county of 1.8 million people.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Wow.
until we get to a point where we can start expanding that, the drug and alcohol addiction component, then because one exacerbates the other. And then when one is not treated, the mental health isn't treated, the addiction is treated, and vice versa. So, and that's the position that she took, that until we quadruple or add 200-300 detox beds, we can't really say that we have a really big dilemma to deal with, and if we do, it's been because of our neglect.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of this that they need to stop. I mean, my hope at this point, given how fast they were pushing it forward, and I mean, I think that the initial conversations I read technically started back in April-ish, but it was mostly couched under mental health. I think you brought up the fact that even in the agenda, it's not 100% clear that this is what they're talking about.
Yeah, the agenda was really fuzzy, and Richard was trying to get clarification on exactly what is this thing that you want to talk about, and we could never really nail down exactly what it was they were proposing.
Which nobody can do that. There's some, but I have the paperwork. It's like the one item is one thing, and then there's the reports attached to it. It's only in those reports partway down or halfway through the report that you see that it's about enhanced LPS Act conservatorship and
in fact, that's number one on the list.
Yeah, implementation of assisted outpatient treatment, which is Laura's law. And it's, I don't know.
Well, and I can certainly, this gentleman, what this gentleman was just saying about the medical conditions and understanding and realizing that there are medical conditions to be realized, understood, and so forth. At the same time, in the disability community as a whole, the focus is, let's get away from the medical model. Let's look at the individual as an individual. Let's get rid of this attitude of, because I have cerebral palsy, I need X, Y, and Z. You don't know me.
Right.
And if you don't know me, shut up.
Yeah. And the other part of that too is we are our best. We know ourselves the best, and people, until the system starts looking at everybody and valuing the input that they have, it will always fall short. I've walked a difficult path. Many people who meet me never have a clue that I've walked the path that I've walked. If I would have bought into the system, I would have stopped when I was cutting clothing into rags at Goodwill, and I had a Section 8 apartment that I didn't realize at the time I could have kept that voucher, so I lost it along the way. I am now in a project-based Section 8, so that allows me to do a whole lot more than a lot of people live. I'm privileged. I have white skin privilege. I have education privilege. I have other privilege that many of these people on the streets, they either may have or they get discounted and they lose all privilege before they even set a foot into the door. So allies, we need them. We need to make our voices heard. Tuesday, I think they won't start talking about it until 11 a.m. is what they said 11 a.m. at the earliest, so I'm aiming to be there at 10:30. Because I still have to navigate getting in and out of the whole area.
I would be there, but I've got 3 or 4 different things back to back, and there's no way.
Is anybody else coming from SBILC?
I'm gonna see it, what I am gonna do over the weekend is write something up and submit.
Okay, I do know that there are some advocates within the houseless community that are putting together kind of an agenda of how to talk. When I have that information, I'll try to forward it on. You guys can give me email addresses if you want, and I'll make sure I stay connected. We're a small enough group, but hey, vocal minority can be a good thing.
Yeah.
Believe that.
But thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else to add?
Just to add that, what we have in our toolkit is right there on the internet, history of the public guardian abusing conservatees. And now with Connie saying, oh, we want to expand this program that we have abused in the past. Like, does anybody get a warm, fuzzy feeling about that?
No.
We say we locked up our conservatees, we stole their money, we stole their homes, we committed mortgage fraud.
And
We medicated them inappropriately. And now we would like to expand this program to include more people.
Well, and the other troubling part is, for those that are facing my mother's in the dementia fate, but that in and of itself is a very troubling thing, because on the one hand, you want desperately to be able to say, you, mother, have the ability to state what it is you want. Well, that would be nice if my mother could talk. But she's at the stage where she can't do that. So my sister has to do it for her.
Yeah.
So the question becomes where and how to navigate that. But we would like to think that all families are very supportive and loving to their family members and are looking out for their best interests. Unfortunately, that isn't always true.
Right.
However, there should be, and there is right now, laws of the books recently that came up that said if your conservator is not meeting your standards, then you have the right to do this. You have the right to fire them and fight for you.
But I've called those, not conservators, but I've called that office that manages that, which is the same as the one that manages its client CIP program, right? Sorry. Yeah, and in mental health hospitals where I felt my rights were being violated, I reached out to the CAP program, and in the time period we had phone access, I actually could not get through their office, or they would never return my call. Or when they did return my call, they would call the nurses station, and then I would never get their call. Yeah. So the CAP still has problems, but there are avenues.
Yeah.
But sometimes getting this knowledge to people that are already on the underside, on the underbelly of what our society is doing to people, is hard. And getting these people to reach out and trust that, oh, this person might be willing to help me, is even harder. So we end up, the more we do this, we lock people in, and it's
a never-ending battle, because so I've stated that my conservator is really, doing me wrong, stealing that I would have fired the guy.
Right.
So I would have hired somebody new. But that person and had to go through a mandated background check and everything. And that takes a long process. It's not supposed to.
Right.
Yada yada. It's like.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you got this person, in the middle of the soup.
Yeah.
But you're talking about approaching a court to exercise a right to change your conservator. If you're in a locked facility and you have no communication with the outside world, you may have a lot of rights on paper, but you have no way to exercise those rights.
There also is a huge community of developmentally disabled people, individuals with developmental disabilities, and conservatorship, the LPS, the Lanterman Act, there is a level of that that's done with a lot of families. And that was a group of people that couldn't be here tonight, that were hoping to be here tonight, who, because they want to know what options do they have, with their children who are still under 18, but what's the right steps to dealing with.
When were they?
Huh?
I'm sorry, when were they able to come?
Oh, just circumstances. Yeah. But so it's a larger conversation, and I think it's a conversation that doesn't get covered very much. Is there's a need for it, but how do we manage it? And then when the need is abused, how do we get beyond it? And not everybody has access to an attorney every other hour of the day,
Well, and you add one more layer to that, and then there's needs that the care, they can get the care to be managed and everything, and then they move on.
Right.
And whatever. But where is where the dividing line that says, Joe can't take care of himself.
Right.
He needs conservatorship.
Right. And that's a larger conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah. But thank you guys all for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming in and everything else.
Yeah, this would